Hello, everyone. I'm Janet Salmons, Research Community Manager for Sage Methodspace, and I'm pleased to be joined today by Mark Spooner, and we're going to talk about some of the issues for research and scholarship and academic study in these difficult times, and highlight a special issue that he put together for the Qualitative Inquiry Journal. But before we get started, if you're new to Methodspace, this is a blog community sponsored by Sage, and we are interested in everything to do with designing, planning, conducting research, writing about it, sharing results in all different kinds of ways. And you can see at the heart of this diagram, we have teaching and learning, because we think that whether you are a brand new researcher or a very experienced researcher, we all have something to learn. And that's why I enjoy this kind of opportunity to talk with other scholars and really, find out, other perspectives. So why don't you just begin by briefly introducing yourself?
Sure. Thank you so much, Janet, for tackling this important issue. I think that at this time, in the watching what's happening around the globe, and particularly in the United States, which has been a traditional stalwart of championing democracy, I think that there's no greater issue facing us as academics and as citizens in a democracy, if we believe in democracy. So my name is Mark Spooner. I'm at the University of Regina in the Faculty of Education up here in Canada, and I follow these issues very closely, and I work often with Sage, both in the Denzin and Lincoln handbooks of qualitative research. I'm in the 5th and 6th edition, the one that's just about to come out, the 6th edition. And also, as you mentioned, the qualitative inquiry special issues, and in particular this one, higher education in a time of Trump and beyond, resistance and critique. The whole thing got put together really because what we're seeing around the world is very alarming. We're in a time of backsliding democracy and this creeping authoritarianism and an anti-intellectualism that's happening in the United States. I mean, we can see that up here with province, but state by state. If we look at what's happening in Florida, Texas, it's all over in the United States, creeping around. It takes various forms in the ways that state legislatures are trying to limit whole areas of study. We haven't seen this even during the McCarthy years, during the big red scares, where critical race theory and various forms of equity, diversity, and inclusion initiatives in areas of study are being outright banned, being pushed to the margins. People are being fired. So in this regard, I felt like the Academy has not only an important role, but an ethical role in fighting this, in resisting this. And as I was saying before, when I first put the issue together, I thought maybe I was being alarmist. But now I can see that I haven't done enough. We haven't done enough as scholars. So I'd like to go on, but should I just keep talking, or what do you think is the best approach here?
Tell us a little bit about the special issue and the contributions to that. And if you're watching this video, you'll find links to the issue on Methodspace. So we want to make those articles available, but maybe just give kind of a high-level overview of what you included in that issue, understanding that time has moved forward since these articles were written, but still I think that gives a a place to begin the discussion, for people to start thinking about some of the dimensions of these problems.
Sure. The special issue was conceived of just pre-pandemic, just before COVID sort of hit, and it was really a response to what we were seeing globally, as I started to mention. So thanks so much to Sage for making those articles available to people to use. When I approached other scholars, my fellow scholars who are in this special issue, like Brian Keith Alexander, Leslie Williams and Sandy Grande, and Jennifer Ayala and Michelle Fine and others, there was a keen interest to really participate and to get the word out, because often what's been happening in the academy is that are most vulnerable are taking up and putting their bodies on the line the most. And I think we all agree that our resistances ought to be proportionate to the privilege we enjoy in the academy. So it's really, I think, up to the tenured faculty and our more senior members to start fighting. And it's not enough. I know that we're all kind of busy and we all have a passion for teaching and research and community service, but this larger issue of defending democracy and really putting our bodies and our minds on the line, I think, is of utmost importance at this time. And when you start to think about the pillars of a democracy, I think people will naturally talk about the free press. The free press is very important, but as is the legislature, you want free and fair elections, and the judiciary, you want your judges to be impartial and the law to apply to everyone. But the fourth piece that sometimes is overlooked is the academy and the academy's role in presenting the best available evidence, in pushing society from where it is to its aspirational ideals. And that's, the academy's played a vital role in that regard. And we enjoy some of the important job protections like tenure and academic freedom, and sometimes in terms of collegial governance, we're able to govern ourselves, although those are consistently under attack in the United States and also globally. We've seen a backsliding in terms of the Academic Freedom Index. There's a group, the VDEM group, looks every year at academic freedom and what's the health. And there's a very close relationship between the academic freedom one enjoys in a democracy or in a society and the kinds of freedom and democracy that are available in that society. So there's a close relationship. Some of the most populous regions in Canada, in the world, some of the most populous regions in the world, including China, India, the United States, Mexico, have seen a backsliding in terms of their acceptance of academic freedom and a more hands-on authoritarian state that's really dictating what can and can't be studied at the university and what kinds of things, what kind of histories are able to be deployed and looked at, and which histories are erased and pushed to the margins.
Right. It seems to me that in our time, the place of scholarship, and I agree with you that it needs to be considered right up there with, kind of the fundamentals of democracy in a free society, but that, in our time as scholars, we have a responsibility to explain why what we do is so important. Why is it important to have the kind of layers of oversight that we're accustomed to, that a research proposal is reviewed, then it's reviewed by, an ethics process, and it's reviewed by, others, in the field before the study is even takes place. And then in the publication process, we have these layers of review, and we know they aren't perfect. We know that, that they need to be improved. However, there's a big difference between that kind of disciplined inquiry and careful writing that is distinct from today. I thought this and I posted it on social media, therefore it is true. And so how do we, the role of explaining the value and why this is something that is worth protecting? Because I think, for people who are outside of higher ed, who maybe don't even have a college degree, these things seem very opaque to them. And they're like, oh, well, we don't, why do we need that? And so, to me, as we start to think about, well, what can we do and what do we encourage those who are watching this interview to be thinking about in terms of their practice? It seems to me that standing up for what we do and speaking up is really essential right now.
Oh, I couldn't agree more. In fact, I think that it's not hyperbole to say that our very democracy is at stake at this time. We're at a very critical juncture, like I mentioned before, where authoritarianism, anti-intellectualism, this kind of populist version of those is taking over, and academics have to speak out. Keeping quiet and keeping to ourselves in our peer review committees and our collegial sort of spaces isn't enough anymore. We really have to put our bodies on the line, put our ideas on the line. We need to do a better job, I think, of getting out into the community and fostering relationships. We have as you mentioned too, an ethical responsibility to the communities in which we reside to be defenders of that democracy. We're one of those great pillars, and we really have to put our bodies to the line, on the line, and that really has to be proportionate to the privilege we enjoy. And I think we've seen it's immigrant students being kept out of the United States, students of color who are really paying the biggest price and putting up the biggest fights to preserve some of these rights that they've had, and to enjoy even the notion that they count as a person, that they are people and not illegals and must be deported, and that they don't even count, say, as a human. And I think that this is a crucial time, that doing what we've done in the past will only lead to a further diminishment of our ability to resist later. That we're being atrophied, we're being attacked, we're being shut down, and the time now is to speak out.
So I think a lot about, the implications of these issues for researchers. We've all heard the little phrase of like, well, they came for these people, but it wasn't me. So, I didn't do anything. So, I think, well, okay, they came for the books, then they came for the libraries. Now they're coming for the librarians. They're coming for the discussion of the ideas in the classroom. They're coming for professors and teachers and the whole tenure and systems. So then, what does this mean for researchers? That, and as we think about student researchers who are trying to decide what kinds of problems to study, or for experienced researchers who are putting together their research agendas, are the kind of issues that may be considered by somebody to be a hot button issue being ignored because people are simply afraid to tackle it. And for those who are tackling those difficult issues, what kinds of protections, not only protections in terms of, well, are you going to keep your job and are you going to be able to stay as a student, but like, are you physically at risk from bullying, cyberbullying, or even that people can get your address and come to your home? I'm hearing from researchers who are saying, yes, this is not what you and I are talking about. We're not talking about some distant future or maybe even next year. These are the things that are happening right now. And I think, in some ways it's just so outrageous that, you kind of can't believe it. So if it's not happening immediately to you, you kind of go like, surely this will blow over. But
well, yeah, I definitely think that researchers are in danger first, in terms of the very physical danger that you mentioned, being doxxed, being tacitly encouraged by the state to be harassed. When we look at these state legislations that seek to ban things like critical race theory and all kinds of versions of equity, diversity, and inclusion, gender studies, any of those areas, people who are doing important work there are increasingly under more danger. And that's an important aspect of this, that people are, if not being told not to do it, they're being threatened. And it's a tacit, sometimes it's it's an unspoken threat. And other times it's a very real threat that people are coming to people's homes. And if we think about the Red Scare and McCarthyism and how people thought, how could that have ever happened? And how did America ever let that happen? We're witnessing it right now, except in an even grander scale, that these aren't just individuals suspected of communist ties. These are, or communist sympathies towards communism. This is entire areas of study, entire frameworks by which to analyze the world in which we live, our lived experience, speaking about methodology and methods. And state governors are telling us that and lawmakers are not permitted. They're censoring, banning, making it very uncomfortable, eroding things that used to protect us, like tenure. If you look, that's in Florida. I think Florida is an important test case for a lot of these.
Right now, several states in the United States are doing things like saying, well,
Georgia,
all new faculty hires will not be on a tenure track, or
Right.
denying tenure to people who've already gone through tenure review. So that those things are happening. And, on the other side, even beginning to go after publishers, so, if you're publishing books that contain ideas that they don't like, that it's not a matter of like, well, we don't like it, so we won't read it. It's like, no, it could be a criminal charge, literally a criminal charge,
Right.
publishing things that somebody has decided they don't like. It's just it's a difficult time. So I mean, I'm glad that you were able to pull together this special issue and to begin, give us a chance to begin this conversation and hopefully, encourage others to, look at, the things that are going on in their fields of study, and thinking about, the roles that they can play. I mean, is your strength as someone who can communicate to the public in a way that could clearly explain, what, the role that scholars play and the value of research, even the roles of things like theory. I mean, I find it kind of amusing that, they're attacking critical race theory, and you're like, do you know what a theory is? I mean, it's not, it's like, it's a theory. It's not, but.
Well, and attempting to rewrite history itself, where areas of historical record are being, pushed away because it might make people feel uncomfortable. I talk about if we looked at the Red Scare, I would talk about this epoch, this time we're in, as a white scare, and as people reacting in all kinds of ways to ensure that they withhold their white supremacy in a lot of ways. And I think that people are sometimes shy away from that sounds too alarmist or too extreme, white supremacy, but it's precisely what's happening across the United States. There's not a state almost that hasn't been touched by attacks on critical race theory of one form or another in the K-12 system. Some of those move up to the higher ed. And it's exactly like you said, first they came for the librarians or the books or the artists, but I wasn't one of those. And I think if we don't speak out now, there won't be enough power in the academy as a pillar to defend the democracy that we all aspire towards, that we all want. And so each of those pillars that I mentioned, the legislature, the judiciary, the free press, and the academy, has been under attack in the United States and globally. And it's the hallmark moves of an authoritarian seeking government to attack those very pillars in order to push an authoritarianism. We're also, as we've been talking about, pushing an anti-intellectualism and really making up facts, making up fictions that aren't true. Our job as scholars is to speak truth to power, to present the best available evidence, and all of these things are under attack. And these are things that I'm very fortunate and appreciative that you're helping to defend with the spaces that you're given at Method Spaces and at Sage. And I think that we all have to find our place in this resistance, because if we care about democracy, the fight is now.
Right. Right. Well, yeah, so, and if we care about freedom of thought and, you know, the ability to discern, you know, what is of value or not, and to evaluate the evidence behind particular arguments or positions, and decide, you know, make decisions based on those, what we learn, that, you know, those are things that we kind of, I think, take for granted as scholars and as people who work in this kind of field. So, you know, it almost seems like it's a time for each of us to kind of step back and say, wait a minute, like, what are the things that I actually do? You know, what is the nature of my work? You know, whether you teach, whether you're a student, an academic writer, you know, whatever your role is in the field, you know, what is it that I do and why is that important? You know, I think, you know, when we're busy, you know, we just carry on like, well, you know, I've got my to-do list and all of the, you know, it's the end of the semester or it's the beginning of the semester, and I've got things, you know, papers are due, and or papers I have to grade, or whatever, you know, that's keeping you busy, you know, that I think, you know, we're trying to encourage, you know, anyone who is watching this to say, well, you know, step back from this and think about, you know, what are the characteristics and the qualities of the work that you do, and how can you stand up for those? How can you, you know, where is the place that you need to speak up? You know, whether it's, you know, in your own community, you know, at the decision-making of your state, you know, the people who fund your institution, to just, you know, stand for the credibility of our work. Not saying that we're perfect and there are no, you know, there's not improvements that could be made, but, you know, the essential value of what we are about.
Sure. I mean, those technologies of governance, like the audit culture and the kind of performance-based funding and performance-based auditing that we're under, keep us very busy, that we have to keep feeding a sort of surveillance machine the numbers that it needs, whether it's H indexes or citation counts, grant money brought in, all of those things are such that they keep us focused and not really making the big links and looking at the big picture, which in this case is, it's not alarmist to say democracy itself. And I could say it's not a coincidence either. This is purposeful, that at a time of great methodological possibility and imagination, when a greater diversity of people are being brought into the system and finally being allowed some access to the system is pushing back and saying, no, we won't have those voices. That all of those efforts that we've made, if we've made any gains in equity, diversity, and inclusion, and the kinds of ideas, and like I was saying, the methodological possibility and imagination that comes with those minds and bodies, and cultures, at this time, it's not a coincidence that we're also, the state is now shutting those ideas down. And so I think that this is all part of a white supremacist action, really. And I think that we do have to fight back. And the time is now to maybe put the numbers aside, get off that hamster wheel, and make linkages in our communities and with our fellow colleagues, and really band together across state lines, across country lines, and globally. We need to resist what we've seen, and that's a very alarming backsliding democracy globally. Democracy is receding. It's not a time of great hope in that regard. And our internal democracy is some of the greatest stalwarts of democracy, including the United States, Canada, the United Kingdom. Lots of these places that have sort of championed democracy abroad are now finding themselves under an increasingly authoritarian rule, and it's sadly ironic, and also a real call to arms.
Right. Well, we're hoping to continue this discussion with some of the other contributors to this special issue and encourage others to write about what they're experiencing in their scholarly work, how they're continuing to ask the difficult questions and include diverse voices as participants, as sources, and as ways of knowing and understanding. So is there anything else that you would like to add?
No, just that I'm very hopeful. That's the other piece, that if we have to maintain our radical hope, because if we don't have hope, it keeps us from trying anything. And we have to try something. That's the thing about actions. We don't know which action will catalyze the change that we seek. And so as I look around and say, it's not like we have an abundance of change happening and we can afford to overlook some, that we have to try every action that we can think about, however small, however quirky, however different, and attempt it, because we don't know which particular action or series of actions, networks of actions will eventually catalyze that change that we so desperately need. And we got to turn this around. We really have to push and start defending our democratic traditions. And like others have said, you can't put democracy on autopilot, that every new generation has to fight for the democratic principles that the previous generation maybe took for granted. And that there's no autopilot to democracy. It's a participatory thing that needs to be you have to participate in it. You can't just kind of passively watch it happen, or it will sort of backslide towards authoritarianism. And I think we're seeing that now. So I'm really hopeful to see what kind of networks we could build through method spaces and through these conversations, and really bring more voices in and interact and engage with each other and find strength and joy with each other as we fight for what we know to be true and just.
Well, thank you for taking the time to talk about these difficult matters. And I look forward to continuing the discussion with some of the other contributors to this special issue, and others throughout the field who are standing up and trying to both tell the story about what is going on and help to mobilize the field. And I agree. I think it's as difficult as the time is, sometimes when you feel under attack, it's a good time to reflect on the value of what it is that you do, that you may have started out your career inspired by, but with the busyness of everyday life, things just go by. I again really think this is a time to reflect on why the things that we do are so important and how they play into building a better and more fair society. So let's we'll continue to look for those opportunities.
Let's continue to cause beautiful trouble. I think that's very important, and we have to continue our work in troubling the comfortable and making comfortable the troubled. And I think that's part of our work, and I look forward to future opportunities, and I'm very thankful for the current one. So thank you, Janet. And thank you, Method Spaces, for this opportunity.